that made me think that, well, really we should revisit that page and sort of be saying something much more definite than it. It really is just a minor edit of how it used to be about 5 years ago, and even then it was a bit off the main line of perhaps what most of us think of open education resources. So sort of, is it about refreshing the image of what we mean by what's become known as OER? Is it about getting at least the concept of practice across it? I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to do to come up with another acronym and sort of have OEP versus OER, but sort of thinking of OER in the broad as including that practice element. So I think I've given you a sort of side answer, which is guidelines is all very well, but is it the thing that will give you the impact you want? Is it the thing that you actually vision making a difference with? What I used to answer that is, it's my guidelines for you.
Sure, Patrick. I think these are key issues, and I think factoring in some evaluation of the impact of these is going to be critical in terms of seeing how they're used. Okay, great. So Hans, have you got some comments?
I am a little bit skeptical about having guidelines. My own experience is in promoting open educational resources through teacher training, and I don't see teachers really reading guidelines. But when we think about guidelines, we should think what kind of impact we want to have. And in creating open educational resources, I think the main challenge is to guide people to create these kind of resources that can be not only reused but also edited and remixed by other people. So they have to think about license compatibility issues, they have to think about open formats, they have to understand that there is no one tool that they can use for authoring, but there are many small different tools that they must use together. So I think the authoring guidelines should go to that direction.
And I think it is going to be difficult developing these guidelines, but I think it may well be using them, practically in active sessions, such as in teacher training sessions, will be important, or other routes as well. I think we may well look to, the practice from GIST, for example, in the way that they've translated most of their research outputs into very good, effective practice guides for different kind of intended audiences, including senior managers. So the nature of the focus of the guidelines for senior managers, for example, is going to be very different for teachers, and will need to be presented in different ways, I think. Great. So, David, your thoughts?
Okay. I think I would agree with a lot of what Patrick said, actually. I think that's quite a huge call for me. I'm not certain that necessarily guidelines, which I perceive as kind of basic stuff of things that you need to know to get past particular problems, is what we need. I think when it comes down to it, each of the issues that we've talked about, it comes down to an argument. It comes down to somebody wanting to do something and somebody wanting not to do something. What I'd like the guidelines to be in all of these areas and in the cultural area that I mentioned is, actually especially in the cultural area that I mentioned, is to be giving people tools that they can use to win this argument. I think an example of this is the argument to senior staff. A lot of the time people propose around the senior staff that we can't do that, we're giving away our materials, it's our livelihood, we'll go past, we'll be bankrupt, etc. And you just point to the example of New York University, you point to MIT, you point to Oxford or Nottingham and say, look, these guys are doing it. It's not affecting them at all. They seem to be going on quite well. So I combination of examples like that, and I suppose you could almost call it rhetoric, as kind of answers to the common arguments that it means academics doing loads more for not any more money. It's just an extra burden. They're concerned about the quality of the materials. University lawyers might feel the whole thing's very risky. That kind of stuff, I think, is what we need rather than just straight-ahead guidelines.
Really good suggestions, practical suggestions there, David. We'll kind of look into those for sure. And last but of course not least, from our expert panel, Andy, your thoughts?
I'm afraid I'm going to be another one to criticise the use of the word guidelines, and in the sense that Patrick said that they might not get used. I think actually what you really need to be focusing on is recommendations. You've got both within what you're doing aspects of policy, and you've got aspects of practice. I think it's better to make recommendations about how people can change policies and change practices to support open educational practices or open educational resources. And I think this sort of comes in two levels. I mean, in a sense, you could go back and look at all the guidelines or recommendations that was made in the old cost roadmap, which covered a lot of these things, and some of them are still valid in terms of policies, in terms of institutions might be having a policy around the inclusion of open educational resources within the teaching and learning strategies, but equally about them being in the rewards and promotion strategies and things like that. But there's got to be some carrots and in this, in terms of what institutions or others are doing in terms of giving the signals to staff that this is a worthwhile thing to do. Because I've had many requests come through to me and saying, have you got a good example of an institutional policy around open educational resources? And it's difficult to find a published one. I mean, Peter mentioned what the UNL have got and things like that. But it's difficult to find those real examples. If we could pull those out and show them to people, it would be important. And I think I'd sort of pick up on the teacher training or staff development side in terms of practices and policies as being important as well. David hasn't mentioned, but within the HEA element of the UK OER2 programme, they've got one strand which is looking about open materials from accredited courses which deal with higher education sort of teacher training practice, and 6 of the fellows within SCORE that I mentioned earlier are also dealing with academic practice. And in fact, one of those is also putting together a sort of digest of available open education resources on academic practice, and what they want to do, and some of the others are doing, is how to modify that material such that it talks about using open educational resources as part of academic practice that are also open educational resources and can be then included, embedded within all the accredited programs that sort of certainly universities here in the UK have to do and things like that. And I've just put up the URL of the developing unit, which deals with listing all those things. But there's a lot more going on in this area. Because I think the real recommendations or sort of guidance we want to give is about the ways in which these types of practices can be, or policies or practices can be embedded into the existing institutional policies and practices, but they also need to be congruent with the institutional mission and ethos. Just to explain that, I mean, one of the interesting things about some of these fellows is one of them from Oxford is wanting to look very closely about how high-flying researchers can make use of open education resources and take their research into open education resources and therefore through into teaching and teaching practice, rather than just more straightforward lecturers and teachers. Others are wanting to look at the issues around what that might be specific to STEM subjects or to the humanities. Again, it's about looking at the particularities of practice in particular areas, and then being able to show how open education resources can be useful in aiding those types of practices in different ways.
Before opening it up to the rest of the team, can I put you on the spot, and do you want to come back and respond to some of the comments there and reflections, given that Alka will be leading on the development of this work?
Hello everybody. This has been a very good meeting, I think, although we were not able to reach or get all those people whom we wanted to participate, but the input that we have gotten today has been really valuable in regard to our work, what we are doing now. I was especially delighted of these very, very last comments that we had. I think everybody was kind of suggesting that we refrain from using the word guidelines in this context. We already had a similar discussion during our project meeting and workshop in Lisbon last month, and there were some very strong views expressed that recommendations should be more proper in this context.
Andy, you need to switch the button off because you've still got the audio line open. Thanks, that's great. Okay, can I just open it up to the rest of the team? Are there any other reflections anybody else from the team would like to make? Paul or Thomas? Okay, if not, I think we're pretty much done now. I just wanted to thank you all on behalf of the team for a really, really valuable discussion. And we invited about 20 people to this meeting, but actually I think having a smaller number has been very rich, and it's enabled us to go into far more depth than perhaps we'd have been able to with 20. Maybe that was a bit ambitious. We will, of course, take these reflections and look at them in detail in relation to the work we've done and the work we're planning to do. And the session has been recorded, so we'll make that available, and we'll draw out the key points and make that available as a paper for you to look at. So we're hoping to have a follow-up meeting in November in Paris. We'll be sending out further details about that, and if there are other suggestions of people you think might be interested or would be useful to be involved with that, if you could let Paul Mundine know at the OU. So ahead of time, I'm delighted to say thank you all very, very much for your time. It's been really fantastic. Thanks in particular, Susan, for being there open early in the morning, although luckily it's not too early for you. And it's been great meeting with you all virtually. Thanks again. Bye.